Okay, day 330. Today, we look at the same deal we looked at yesterday, just to refresh everybody, right? This was a property we looked at yesterday, but today we're going to take a little different angle at it because yesterday we just assumed 64 grand, we're going to renovate it, and then we are going to rehab it as is. But we never looked at, well, what if this is a BRRRR deal, right? A BRRRR deal means you are buying a property, you're rehabbing it, you're renting it out, you're refinancing it to try to pull out as much capital that you have invested into the deal so that you can recycle that capital and repeat it, right? So the whole point of the BRRRR strategy is so that you understand that you have a big upfront capital. But with that upfront capital, you are forcing value into the property by renovating it, whether that is like a full gut rehab or maybe a turnkey rehab or a very minor cosmetic rehab is enough to drive enough value into the property, although that's probably really rare if that is the case. But that is how you force more value into the property than what you sometimes necessarily put in so that you can refinance a portion of the deal and take out those proceeds to pay yourself back. And hopefully the perfect BRRRR would mean that you are able to get back out all your capital up front. Now, let's go ahead and see how we do it. Now, if you ever want to BRRRR property, right, you need to rely on sold comps, right? If you ever want to look at sold comps, right, just make sure that you are trying to compare apples to apples, right? Obviously, your best case scenario, right, your best comparable property would be literally the property that is sold was a same bed bath count, same square footage, and it's next door to your house. That would be the world's best comp, right? So if you take that as sort of your benchmark, then think about it, right? The further and further you move away from your home makes that comp less reliable, right? The more square footage or less square footage compared to your home, the less reliable that comp is. So this is why when it comes to comping, it's truly an art more than an exact science. But that's how I would think about it, right? So if you look at this property, 1001 Valley Road Place, right? What I typically do is I try to understand what neighborhood is this property in, right? So you see how this property is right here. It's between I-20 and this big Route 11. I, for sure, if I can, I try to stay within the main streets, right? Because the neighborhoods are very, very different. So if I ever see any of these things, this is like Bellevue Heights or some sort of name for that neighborhood, I try to stay and look for comps in that same neighborhood. Obviously, if something that's sold within the past 3 months, great. 6 months, okay. 12 months, maybe if it's really, really rare, but anything past a year, that's a really, really tough comp. And you just got to understand your risk goes higher, the worse comp you have, right? That could be related to date, bed bath count, square footage, neighborhood, etc. Obviously, I try to not stay within, but if for some reason I can't find any 4 bedrooms here, right, I might say, hey, let me look for some 4 bedrooms here. Just because you got to understand your market has a very, very selective inventory, and you don't necessarily understand exactly how much inventory moves in that particular neighborhood, right? So just be very mindful. So what I typically do is I usually go through all these zip codes, right? And I kind of write down, hey, where am all my sold comps by 3 bedrooms? Where am I sold comps by 4 bedrooms like I have here? And I kind of browse and I try to figure out like, okay, is this property going to be good? This property sold for 114. That's 2,000 square feet. Mine's only 1,200. That doesn't seem like a great comp. This property is 2,000 square feet, 165 grand. Like these things sort of add up, but maybe they're not as great, but maybe you can still use $1 per square footage, right? If you have similar finishes, similar condition. So what I do is for every zip code, let's say in Birmingham, what I do is I try to figure out what am I going to, oh, whoops, I wasn't supposed to do that. Okay, pull that back up, sorry. Turn on my chat, there we go. Let me reshare this. What I do is I try to look at every single property and I try to figure out whether or not this property is going to make sense. And I look at all my comps, I look at all the bed bath counts, and then I also look at the sold prices. And then what I do is I try to figure out, okay, I literally just saw that this property was in Bellevue Heights. So here's all my sold comps that are 3 bedrooms in Bellevue Heights. And I try to figure out whether or not these properties are going to make sense. So I put up 3 properties for you. So this property was sold for 250 grand, 3-bed, 2-bath. But you can see these finishes are really top of the line, in my opinion. Like, that seems like a very expensive rehab. And that might be slightly over renovating the property for that neighborhood. I have this property right here, 5416 Court H. Decent finish. This is probably going to be along the lines of what I'm going to do, 130 grand. Slightly above average, but those were just terrible photos. And this property is pretty good in itself, right? Not bad. And this property sold for March 1, 2024. What was it sold for? 95 grand. Let me see. 1761. This was sold for 92 grand. So now I got sort of my bottom case scenario, right? If that property sold for $82 a square foot, now I can start figuring out, okay, where is my confidence? So I'm going to pull up my BRRRR calculator right here. Let me delete this. That was from my old renovation. Okay. Let me zoom in a little bit so you guys can see a little bit better. So this property this is a different scenario because I'm trying to figure out when I can BRRRR it, right? When I can get most of my properties out. Now, 3-bed, 1-bath, 1252 square feet. I'm assuming I'm keeping this a 3-bedroom right now, right? That's the analysis I'm going for. Because if I want to look for 4 bedrooms, I need to look for comps that have 4 bedrooms and can get their dollar per square footage. Okay. This is a 3-bed, 1-bath. And because this is 3-bed, 1-bath, I think my best comp is going to be this $82 square foot, even though my house is a little bit bigger. But sometimes you never know when I can get the same dollar per square foot, even if you just go 100 square feet bigger. But I'm going to assume that for now, right? Again, this is all in art. You're just trying to figure out whether or not this is really going to be worth your time. All right. So if I assume my asking price is 64 grand, and yesterday, if you looked at our live from yesterday, the rehab we estimated was $58,000, 64 grand. I'm going to estimate that my ARV is $102,000 if I assume $82 a square foot, which I got from 1761 48th Street. Now, the market rent we did yesterday was probably $1,300, if I remember correctly. Let me go ahead and put this back into. I'm gonna put this into affordablehousing.com just to kind of refresh my memory instead of having to. Affordablehousing.com. Boom. 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 1179. So I'm going to use 1180. 1200. I'm going to use 1200 as my rent. And then I'm going to use my real estate taxes right here, my insurance right here that I plugged in from yesterday. So at $80 square foot, my ARV would be 102. Okay. Now let's go into my calculator. If I buy for 64 with a 58,000 of rehab, but my ARV is $102,000, I'm essentially sinking more money into the property than what it's worth, right? And let me show you why this might not be a deal. So we don't have to use any of this. I'm assuming I'm borrowing all the money from a private capital partner at 10% interest only. That's what I'm doing right now. Okay. Now, when I have that number, I'm going to go into my rehab. This is kind of me underlining what my scenarios are. 58 grand. I even got my holding cost in here. I know I'm going really fast. But what I wanted to show you is that this is the process that we're going to take to just simply understand when that's worth our time, right? I got closing costs of 5% right now for the closing costs. I got about 5 months of holding costs, just assuming that my rehab takes 5 months. And this is using my monthly payment, my PITI, plus my taxes and insurance, right? So that's how I get to my PITI and with a 6 grand holding cost. So this is how you get to the total holding costs. And I'm putting 100% down because I am buying all cash in this deal. Just assuming this is a scenario, right? Your capital stack or your arrangements of financing is going to be very different. All right. So I go through a couple of scenarios here. Usually I have a bad case scenario where, hey, I go over budget by 20% and there's another 3-month delay. So this is a reminder to myself, hey, when I go and approach this capital, I should probably have at least another $15,000 of financing in place, whether or not that's something I borrowed from a private money lender or something along those lines, so that I don't have to go out and re-borrow capital when something does happen that I did not expect or did not anticipate. Now, if you have really, really high confidence in your team, you might not need to do that. But that's something that I should keep on top of my mind. All right. So once we get to the rent part, I got $1,200. Don't really worry about the cash flow prior to refinance, because what I really want you to think about is, okay, what am I going to make after I refinance? So now, after I refinance, utilities paid by landlord. I don't have to pay any utilities anymore. Got my property management at 10%. I got repairs maintenance at 7%. It's a little bit lower than my 10% than yesterday, because I'm assuming I'm doing a pretty big rehab and I'm getting it for the most part. But I still got 5% reserves for vacancy or anything like that. Now, for my refi, if I assume my ARV is $102,000, right, and I can only get a loan amount for 75% of the ARV, I can only get a loan amount for 76 grand. If I have an interest rate, this is the most important part, right, guys? If I have interest rate 8% with a amortization of 30 years, right, this is my total PITI after I refinance. Now, if I can only refinance 76 grand, even though I put in $131,000, I'm leaving $54,000 into the deal. So when I get to my cash and cash analysis, right, after I subtract all my expenses from my rent, this is how much cash flow I'm making the deal, and I will end up only with a 5% return on the money. So even though I increased the value of the home, it wasn't enough to make the deal worth it, especially as if I finish renovating the property, I refinance it, I try to take out as much money as possible, but I'm still leaving $54,000 in the bank, in the deal, I mean. But I'm only making $2,800 of cash flow. That's not enough given how much capital I've invested, especially given all the execution risk that you went through, right? When you go through a 50 grand, 60 grand rehab, you got to have a lot of confidence in your crew to make sure that they're going to follow through and execute on the deal and show up when they're supposed to. So for 5%, again, this is not an investment advice. I'm not soliciting any investments on this call, but that is not a deal that I would typically want. So hopefully this was helpful. I am looking for feedback. Help me understand which part of a BRRRR analysis do you all have the most questions about. And I'm going to do more focus using the BRRRR strategy, because we've done a ton of analysis using creative. We've done a ton of analysis using just on-the-market traditional financing. I've realized that I haven't done enough BRRRR analysis here, and I am always looking to improve my way of talking about it and also looking for ways to improve on how I educate about this. It's a great strategy, right? It's very, very important for everybody to understand it. So I'm looking for more feedback. Tell me what questions you have. I'm going to focus more on this over the next couple of weeks. All right. Have an amazing Sunday, everybody. Hope you all had a great weekend. I will be back here again tomorrow for day 331. Have an amazing day, everybody. I'll see you all tomorrow.